century. And it's a very important message that he has to offer for you and also for me. Now, I don't know whether you've had a tough morning or whether you can remember in the recent days a tough morning. Well, if you can, then you will sympathize with Jesus, because the story that I'm going to tell you is embedded in a tough morning for Jesus. He's been teaching, he's been in the capital, he's been in the temple, so you would anticipate that he's going to get a warm response from those people who will value his presence with them and his teaching. But unfortunately, even though it's just after breakfast, the response of the people to whom he's teaching is to want to kill him. And they have decided how they're going to kill him. They're going to stone him to death. And in the ancient world, the practice of stoning is carefully prescribed. The person who is to be stoned is laid on the floor face down, and a rock is lifted to be about 4 meters above them and is dropped. The assumption is that the back will be broken and death will soon follow. But if for some reason it doesn't happen, then the person is flipped over onto their back, and the same procedure happens with a rock being dropped from the same height, but this time onto the heart of the person. And if the person still lives, then a volley of stones are hurled at the victim until he or she is dead. If I was Jesus, I wouldn't want to be there. Time for an escape, time for a safe house, time to get away. But interestingly, Jesus does not choose to get away. It would be my priority, but it is not his priority because, of course, he's Jesus, and sometimes other priorities will come to the fore. And on this occasion, there is one item on his agenda that supersedes the need for him to escape the mob. You see, he sees a blind man. Now, Jesus could be forgiven for walking past this blind man because the blind man clearly can't see him. The blind man doesn't request any help from him, and indeed nobody intervenes on behalf of the blind man and asks Jesus for any help. So if I was Jesus, I would have walked by. And if Jesus had wanted to help this blind man, because clearly he has all power, then he could have come back on another occasion when things had quietened down a bit. But he doesn't. His focus is not on his own personal safety, but on this blind man. The question is, why? Well, because you know Jesus, you may anticipate that you know the answer. He is wanting to heal this man of his blindness, and you would be right in your assessment. That is what he is going to do, but that is not the main reason why Jesus does not run away and instead turns to this blind man. You see, the real reason is because his attention is not just to this man, not just to his need to be healed, but he plans through this event to make a statement that is going to be beneficial to everybody who is there and to everybody who hears this story, which John uniquely tells in his gospel. This is more than a wonderful story of healing. So let's read the story. It's taken from John chapter 9, and I'm just going to read the first part of this story to you so we can get the context for the message. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned? Was it this man or his parents because he was born blind?" And Jesus answered, "It wasn't that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We," says Jesus, "must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work, but as long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said these things, he spat on the ground, and he made mud with the saliva And then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud, and he said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went, and he washed, and he came back seeing. And the neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" So who is he, this blind man? He's not named. All we know is that he is a blind man. It is not a comprehensive description of this person. But having said that, because we know that he is a blind man, his status is clearly characterized so that we understand that his position in society is to be towards the bottom. He is on the lower echelons of the Jewish community. How do I know that? He's blind. You see, being blind in the first century was not just a devastating disease that affected many, but it made a statement to everybody around you, especially in the Jewish environment. You see, the rabbis, the Jewish religious leaders, they concluded that to be a blind man was only slightly better than being dead. And the reason they said that was because there is no hope for you. You cannot be healed of your blindness. There is no therapy that is available to even slightly improve your condition. In fact, they actually said that it is as difficult to heal a blind person as it is to raise somebody from the dead. To be blind in the ancient world was an awful experience. In the Old Testament, God had healed certain people of certain illnesses, but never once did any Jewish prophet heal anybody of blindness. There was no precedent for anybody being healed of blindness in the Jewish world. Not even God had healed any Jewish person of blindness. This man, this blind man, was not expecting a miracle. The disciples were not expecting a miracle. The people around were not anticipating that there was any reason why they should bring this man to Jesus for Jesus to heal him, because he was too big an ask. Nobody had done that before. It was too difficult. But there's something else about blind people that we need to understand so that we can position ourselves in the place of this man. You see, being blind in the ancient world meant that you were helpless. You weren't just hopeless, but you were helpless and you were dependent on others. Now, this is a society where shame and honor are most significant elements in the worldview of the time. And this man, being blind, is in the most dishonorable state because he cannot contribute anything to his society. Blind people were on their own. This man is on his own. Nobody brings this man to Jesus. Nobody is on the side of this man. In fact, in the ancient Jewish world, it's very difficult to bless a blind person because it looks as if God has cursed him. So how can you help someone to whom God has shown disdain and a determination to punish? Blindness, the ultimate disaster, a fate akin to living dead. All he can aspire to is to be a beggar. But then there's one more thing about being a blind person, and I've already hinted at it, and you will have heard me saying the same about other people with illness in the first century. To be ill in the first century meant you assumed that you had done something wrong, as a result of which God has chastised you. He has punished you because you must have sinned. And the easiest way to identify that you must have sinned is because of the illness that you carry. Now, blindness was understood to be at the top of conditions that resulted from severe sin. So the people assume that this man is not just helpless, hopeless, but God has punished him because he has done something heinous in its extremity. That's their assumption. And even the disciples, there is no confusion in the minds of the disciples as to why this man is blind. He sinned. They readily acknowledge that, even though it's not true. Their confusion arises from the fact that he is born blind. Now, John, in the telling of the story, says that this man is born blind 6 times. It's as if he doesn't want the pathos of that fact to miss us. He's not just blind, He's born blind. The severity of his blindness is extreme. And the disciples say, because he's born blind, Jesus, who must have sinned? Did he sin before he was born in his mother's womb? Or was it his parents? They conclude that some sin must have caused the illness. Jesus' response is, listen, no sin has caused this illness at all. But to him and to everybody else, he must have sinned. That's why in the Jewish world, if you are blind, you can't serve in a religious establishment. You can't serve in the temple. You can't serve in any spiritual sanctuary. You certainly cannot be a priest because you are blind. Even blind animals were not allowed to be sacrificed in the temple for one's forgiveness.